or Esther. The last time we talked about some things about the Megillah. I began with talking about the possibility of the Persian names in the Megillah being almost like a parody for the Jews in the Galut, because Esther and Mordechai have names of Babylonian gods, which is basically reminds us of what Chazal say in Kiddushin, that Yisrael, Bagola, Ovdei Avodah Zarah B'Tahara, the Jews out in Bavel, actually, they're talking about, are worshiping idols in purity, which means they don't even realize how influenced they are by the culture surrounding them. And that's what it means, B'Tahara, and purity, meaning it's not their fault. And I also mentioned, though, and of course, some of the play on words of the Persian words of the Ro'ei Pnei HaMelech, the advisors to the king, that they all also seem to talking about Zoroastrian gods, and even Haman himself as a Zoroastrian god, which would explain the Chazal, why Mordechai didn't want to bow down to him. Chazal actually say that he had a tselem, he had an idol that he would wear around his neck. According to the Persian edition, he didn't even need the idol. His name itself was bad enough. I also mentioned that in the Sefer Chagai, where the Navi is rebuking the Jews living in Babylonia for not making Aliyah to Israel. It's actually under the Persian Empire, and it appears that the story of the Megillah had to take place in the Persian Empire because Koresh is the first king of Persia, and he's the one who allows the Jews to go up to Israel. And since this is happening under Achashverosh, no matter which Achashverosh it was, it's in the Persian Empire after Koresh has already allowed the Jews to come up to the land. So it's interesting also the parallel, because it comes a little bit like our situation now, that here in Israel, we have lots of Jews in the Golah, more than there are in Israel, and we're still going through our development pains as a country. And then, of course, and then the story itself. The story itself, which I mentioned, Megillat Esther, which literally means to reveal the galot, to reveal the hidden, the nistar. And Chazal say, Esther mina Torah minayin, whereas Esther hinted to in the Torah. Shene'emar, it says, Mechukotai, bayam, Esther panai bayam ahu, on that day I shall hide my face. Well, in Devarim. So I shall hide my face. In other words, in the Galut, God's countenance is hidden, and therefore he acts behind the scenes to help the Jewish people. Now I want to go right into the Megillah, and I want to share with you some ideas based on a book written by Rabbi Yeshua Bachrach of blessed memory. He actually taught shiurim in the yeshiva in Or Etzion when I studied there. And he said more in his shiurim than in the book, but the book is still a good book. It's called Kitvuni de Dorot. It's in Hebrew and in English. A book that he wrote about Megillat Esther. So I will start with his ideas, but develop it. Yoshua Bachrach, and the name of the book is Kitvuni le Dorot. Write me down for later generations. According to the Talmud, that's what Esther said to the Sanhedrin when she requested to be part of the Tanakh. So now the Talmud asked the question, and the Midrash too, was Achashverosh a smart king, or was he a foolish king? Now the argument that he's a foolish king is seems to be easy to make, because of the fact that, well, he makes this misiba, he makes this party for 180 days. And in addition to that, he makes another party for another 7 days, and he wants to display Vashti to everybody. So it looks like a foolish king who's sort of like, almost like a playboy trying to, he also has this, when he gets rid of Vashti, he looks for another woman, and he has to have a whole pageant going on. So the question is, was Achashverosh a foolish king, or was he a wise, a smart king? So Rabbi Bachrach takes the position of the smart king. And I'm going to take that position too and try to prove that Achashverosh was a smarter king than it appears. Secondly, I will try to show why the Megillah is called the Megillah of Esther. Because it's Esther who is the one who is able to manipulate everybody in the Megillah until she succeeds at the end, specifically Esther and not Mordechai. By the way, this is very significant. There's one book in the Tanakh named after a woman. It's called Esther. And there's a book in the Apocrypha named after a woman, which is called Yehudit, Judith. Judith, by the way, was read in some Jewish communities on Purim because they associate, not on Purim, excuse me, on Hanukkah, because they associate it with Hanukkah, but actually the Judith story is also happening during the Persian Empire when Judith, if you remember the story, is able to outsmart Holofernes, who is a Persian, who is a Persian general. And just like Yael was able to seduce Sisera and kill him, that's exactly what Judith does to Holofernes. She seduces him and kills him. Exactly like the Yael story in Sefer Shofti. I'll just say very quickly, in the book of Antiquities, if I could show it to you, I didn't prepare it though, unfortunately. In Josephus Flavius' book of Antiquities, there is a chapter which talks about the Cyrus and what made Cyrus decide to allow Zerubbabel to go down to Israel and build the temple. And he brings a sort of I would say almost a comic story wherein Cyrus's palace, he was in a good mood and they were having a festivity, having a party. And Cyrus says, he asks his advisors, who can tell me what the most powerful thing in the world is? So one says that the most powerful thing in the world is an army. And another one says wisdom is the most powerful thing in the world. And then Zerubbabel, the Jew, says that the most powerful thing in the world is a woman. And then they're all wondering why, and he has to explain. He says, well, first of all, Cyrus, who brought you into this world if not a woman? And you're the most powerful king. So obviously a woman is the most powerful thing in the world. And he says, and a woman, and the wife of the king, she can also get the king to do all different things. So she's also very powerful. He gives like a few examples of what we would call the feminine mystique, or sometimes called the femme fatale, the ability of women to manipulate men. And it says that everybody agreed that Zerubbabel came up with the best idea. And after that happened and Zerubbabel won the contest, so then Cyrus turns to him and says, I'm also going to allow you to let the Jews go back to Jerusalem and build up the temple. So Flavius puts it into this very interesting drama, which goes on in the palace, preceding the royal command of Cyrus allowing the Jews to go back. Why do I mention this? Because both these books of Esther and Judith are about this feminine mystique, about the woman who manipulates everybody, the king and Haman, and, right? She's able to manipulate everybody, just like Yael did to Sisera in the book of Shoftim, and just like Judith did to Holofernes in the apocryphal book of Judith. So you have among the Persians this idea of the feminine mystique, this idea that women have the power to control things from behind the scenes. By the way,
the way that they did those things was very unsanua.
We're not talking about sneer, we're talking about power.
When I was young.
Yeah, we're talking about power, and we're talking about manipulation.
They did through wily, seductive ways that are not exactly.
I mean, you could argue that Esther was also not sanua because she married a non-Jew who she didn't necessarily love.
I do say that. I do.
Yeah. The
Yeah.
Talmud asks that
Because
question. How
I'm
come,
holier than everybody else, so it's what I say.
right? Look, the Talmud says, what is this? Why, how did Mordechai allow Esther to marry a non-Jew and be a queen? And the Talmud does not have a good answer, but it says, Esther karka olam. In other words, everything was out of her hands.
But
That's the
Eretz
way I
Nehederet
understand
has a
that
funny skit
idea
on
of
it.
karka olam. Yeah. I'm sorry?
Eretz Nehederet has a really funny skit on Esther and Mordechai. Just saying, just my
Yeah.
2 cents.
Okay.
Honey, if you
Okay.
could
Oh,
share
okay.
it, it
You said it.
would be very important.
I will. After the class, I will.
Okay. So let's get, after saying that, let's go into the story. And as I said, I want to prove that Ahasuerus was a smart king and that everything he is doing in chapters 1, 2 are all things, even chapter 3, are things to make sure that his throne is going to be a lasting throne. Now, I start with the Malbim, which I mentioned at the end of the last meeting. Malbim argues, based on the fact that this is the only pasuk in all of the Megillah, Vahi b'mei Achashverosh, where Achashverosh is mentioned without the title king. In the whole rest of the Megillah, he's either the king or King Achashverosh. So he argues that Achashverosh did a coup d'etat. He was a commoner who overthrew the previous king, who might have been Darius, and was able to come to the throne. That's his argument. If this holds water, it will explain a lot of things that Achashverosh does. The truth is, he could have done it even without that, but it strengthens the argument of why he did it. Okay, so let's look. It came to pass in the days of Achashverosh. As I said before, some people say we're talking about Xerxes the first, who reigned from India until Ethiopia over 127 provinces. In those days, King Ahasuerus sat on the throne of his kingdom in Shushan Habira. Malbim explains what's the difference between Shushan and Shushan Habira. Is the same difference between Prague and Prague 1. If you've ever been to Prague, the castle and the aristocrats, they all live in Prague 1, surrounding the castle. And to get there, you have to cross over the Charles Bridge, if anybody's been to Prague. The rest of Prague, all the way to Prague 9, is where everybody else lives, which I assume in antiquity was much smaller than it is today. So something like that is Shushan. You have Shushan, the city, and then you have the part of Shushan where the palace is, if you want, Buckingham Palace, and the area where the aristocrats live around the palace, exactly like in Prague, where the little houses surrounding the castle were all aristocrats. So that's how Malbim explains the difference between Shushan and Shushan Habira. So Shushan, the castle, the way it's translated here, would be the place surrounding the castle, and the rest of Shushan were other types of people, possibly people with power too, connections, businesses, whatever, but not necessarily the aristocracy and the family of royalty. So in the 3rd year of his reign, he made a feast unto all the princes and servants, the army of Persia and Media, and the nobles and the princes of the provinces before him. He showed the riches of his glorious kingdom, Kvod Malchuto, Yakar Tiferet Gedulato, the honor of his excellent majesty. And he did this for Shmonim Umeat Yom, 80 and 100 days. Now, I'm going to go a little bit further, and then we'll go back to this. And when these days were over, King did another feast to all the people present in Shushan, the castle. Another 7 days. Hasar Binat Kitanan Melech, in the inner courtyard of the king's castle. Now, let me tell you what I think is happening here. This is based on Rabbi Bachman. If you come from the outside and you want to prove that you are a king because you are a commoner, maybe you had connections, maybe you had power, maybe you were smart, but you are not the king, the son of a king. So what's the first thing you have to do to legitimize yourself in the eyes of the people? How do you
lavish parties.
well,
Exactly. I was going to say that. Yeah. Have a
But-
good party.
the party works a little bit It works more in democracies, but I'm talking about people who are used to monarchy. Kings and queens, there's a mystique about the kings and the queens. As Nechama Leibovitz used to always say, kings never killed kings and queens never killed queens. If you remember Shaul HaMelech, he's fighting against Agag, the king of Amalek. And Shmuel tells him, B'Shem Hashem, you got to kill everybody, everybody. And it says, Vayachamo Shaul v'ha'am al Agag val Meitavatzon. It says that Shaul and the people had compassion on Agag and the cattle, meaning Shaul had compassion on Agag and the people had the compassion on the cattle because they wanted it. Why would Shaul have compassion on Agag? Because Shaul HaMelech learned very quickly at the beginning of his monarchy the etiquette of monarchs. Monarchs never kill monarchs. Because if a monarch kills a monarch, it means they're just regular human beings. And then people can kill them too. You have to keep the mystifying feeling of the monarchy alive, that there is something almost superhuman about them. So monarchs never killed monarchs. Look at the book of Shoftim. There's a guy whose name is Adoni Bezek. He had 80 kings, Benechushtaim, who he cut off they were in chains and he cut off their legs and their arms, but he did not kill them. If you look in Sefer Malachim, at the end of the book, where Tzidkiyahu the king was captured by the Babylonians, and they killed his sons in front of him, and they took out his eyes, but they did not kill him. And also the king before him, Yehoiachin, was allowed to sit at the table of the king of Babylonia, Nebuchadnezzar. Kings never killed kings. So Shaul, right away, he realizes that I can't kill a king, I'm a king. And Shmuel realizes what happens, and he says to Shaul, what is this I'm hearing? He meant the cattle. It's actually very interesting. It says in Shmuel there, Umeh kol hatzon hazeh be'oznai. Right? Meh sounds like the mooing of a sheep. Umeh kol hatzon hazeh be'oznai. What am I hearing? Right? All this sheep. And then Shaul tells them because, the people wanted the cattle. And says, and what about Agag? And then Shmuel right away realizes that Shaul is not willing to kill Agag. So what does he do? He doesn't tell Shaul, you better kill Agag. He grabs Shaul's sword and he kills Agag. Samuel. Because right away he understands the problem. He's not happy about it, but he actually likes Shaul and he doesn't want everything to go kaput. But if you remember, after this, Shmuel says, unfortunately, you've lost your kingdom and it's going to be given to somebody else. If you remember when the garment tears, that's all in Sefer Shmuel. So Achashverosh is not a king. He was never appointed by anybody as a king. He's not descended by kings. So what do you do when you're not descended from a king? How do you gain legitimacy in antiquity?
Mhm.
Remember, we're in the Persian Empire. Anybody? Ideas? You have to unmute yourself.
Oh,
Oh,
do you hear
Yes.
me?
yeah.
Now,
Okay.
yeah,
You have to show that you conquered so many places. Don't mess with me.
That's
Like,
also true,
like-
but it's even easier than that. You need the title. In France, in the 1700s and 1800s, you had aristocrats who had titles, but they didn't have money. You had businessmen who had money, and they didn't have titles. So what do? They intermarried. That way, the aristocrats got the money, and that way, the businessmen got the titles.
You think they're they're not doing that still? I'm sure they're still doing that.
Yeah, I'm not saying no, but I'm just saying it
Yeah.
meant much more
Yeah,
at
that's
that
all.
time.
Yeah.
Remember what Chazal say? Who was Vashti, according to Chazal?
Nebuchadnezzar's
Granddaughter.
Nebuchadnezzar's granddaughter, as far as I remember. So in other words, what we have here, he's marrying a title.
Yeah.
Nebuchadnezzar was the king of Babylon. Of course, he was defeated. They were defeated by Persia, but hey, he was the king. So this granddaughter, if she becomes the wife of Achashverosh now controls her title, as long as they're married. So now Achashverosh is officially a king. He married a queen. So he's not just the strong man who controls the army and controls the government. He also is official. He married a real queen, the real deal. Okay. So this is Achashverosh. He was Molech, but he also marries the queen. Now, the second problem is he wants to win over the people. So the first thing he does is he marries Vashti. Then, how do you win over the people? Because there are always going to be people who are going to say, he wasn't really a king, whatever. We didn't know him from before. So then you have two options. When you're a newcomer and you're not sure if the people like you or not, you have two options. Should I let people try to guess, or should I just keep going? Up to you. So the two options, according to Rabbi Bachrach, is either to be like Stalin or to be like John F. Kennedy. He used to say that's the two options. Option number one is, I don't care if the people like me. I'm going to be a ruthless dictator. So either they like me or not, it doesn't even matter. They have no choice. That's option number one. Now, if you go for option number one and you become a Joseph Stalin, you need a whole bunch of people who look like you to go outside, because you never go outside. There are all these guys who look exactly like Stalin. They would wave. Saddam Hussein had a whole bunch of people like that too. They're the guys who looked exactly, all these doubles and triples, and they go around. So the real guy you never see. He disappears somewhere. Nasrallah's in a tunnel under somewhere, So that's what the dictators do. But then there's another option. You could actually win the heart of the people. It's taking a chance. It's a risk, but you might do it. How do you do it? Like Kennedy. You go with an open car, open Cadillac, give hamburgers and hot dogs to everybody, start kissing babies, make all these promises, how wonderful everything's going to be, and you have a good chance. You might win the people over. Okay. Achashverosh decides he's going to try to win the people over. He's going to give it the chance. He did what was necessary by marrying the queen. Now he's going to give the chance. What is the chance? So he's going to have a party. The party is 180 days. Now, I just want to explain what the party of 180 days is. The king is not there every day, but it is in the royal palace. If you go to the royal palace in, let's say if you've been to Krakow, there's Wawel Palace, was a royal palace there from a few hundred years old. And there is the place where the kings and the queens lived. And then there's the place in the palace where they greeted people. It's not the same place, they're different parts of the palace. So in one of the fine rooms of the palace, it was probably open, maybe a few rooms, and it was full of food and entertainment. And it says here, he made all the princes and servants, which means all the people who were somebody in the 127 provinces, they were all invited. All the congressmen and all the senators and all the councilmen and anybody who was somebody, they're all invited, and they would get a piece of paper in the invitation, would say you are invited to come to the palace anytime within this 180-day period, because nobody could come all at the same time, which explains the 180 days. If you have 127 provinces, and we're talking about thousands of people, so everybody was probably assigned a different month and a different day of when they should come, because everybody knows, So that's the 180 days. This is the way I explain it. You have the chance, you can come with your kids, you can take a few selfies together with the guards, together with maybe there are some VIPs hanging around from other provinces too, and you have a good time and you go home. That's the 180 days. But the king was not there. It's in the palace, and people see pictures of the king. Maybe on one of the days he actually said hello and waved from a window somewhere, but that's it. And then he has a second one, which is 7 days. Why 7 days? Because, and by the way, the first one he shows his riches and everything. The second one for the 7 days, who's that for? The people in Shushan Habirah, aristocrats who are living around the palace. That's where he has, that's the serious one. That's the serious party where the king is present every day. And he is networking and schmoozing with everybody because he wants to make sure everybody knows him and then everybody's in line with his ideas. So he goes from one to the other, schmoozing with all the aristocrats, all the Bill Gates and all the ones who like him and don't like him, the powerful ones and whatever, the ones with the titles. And this is what he does for 7 days. He's politicking, he's networking for 7 days. So this guy is not the idiot that he appears to be at first glance when you're reading the Megillah. Now, after I explain that, I'm going to continue. What was in the palace? There were hangings of fine cotton, white cotton and purple and blue, bordered with cords of fine linen and purple and silver rods and pillars of marble and couches of gold and silver, pavement of green and white and shell and onyx marble. And they gave them to drink in vessels of gold, the vessels being diverse from one another, and royal wine in abundance. We are talking about the 7 days. The aristocrats, they're the ones that you have to be really lavish. You can't give regular people vessels of gold because they might disappear. But these guys, they don't need the money, they need the connections. Chazal have an interesting take on this, Hashkot b'flei zahav kelim shanim, that these were vessels taken from the temple. But that's because Chazal were always big Zionists, and they always looked at to see what's going on and how you can relate it to the fact that Yerushalayim is not in our hands. I'll mention that too at the end, but not right now. That's Chazal and Megillah. And people were drinking according to the law, actually, Kedat Enones, none did compel, for the king had appointed to all the officers of the house, they should do according to whatever a person had desired. Okay, so far everything is going well. The 180 days entertainment for the lower clerks worked out fine. Now we're in the 7 days, the very sensitive politicking with the who's who in the aristocracy, where the king is there, and they're all drinking wine from cups of gold, and I'm sure the king is politicking every day. And Vashti, the queen, also made a feast during these 7 days, meaning these 7 days, probably said to Vashti, I need your help, because this is the who's who, and I'm going to need you here. I didn't need you for the 180 days. I need you for the 7 days. So she also made a mishteh for women, because the women, of course, see the women, we're talking about antiquity, it's still a, paternally patron, what's the term, oriented society. And then on the 7th day, the heart of the king was merry with wine, and he's starting to feel like he's now getting in close with all the who's who of Shushan Habirah. And so he says to Mehuman, and the 7 chamberlains, the Meshartim, the servants, to bring Vashti, the queen, before the king in the royal crown, show the people and the princess her beauty, for she was fair to look on. So, what's going on here? Is this a private beauty pageant? In my opinion, no. The Talmud does say that he wanted her to come naked. But let's put that aside for the moment. Whether he wanted her to come naked or not, Vashti didn't want to come. And it says the queen refused to come at the king's commandment. But to Ma'ena Malka Vashti. And the king was wroth with anger. Why does Vashti not want to come? Why is it so important for the king to bring Vashti? If you're following my logic until now, I think you'll get it.
He wants to show that she's from the king. She's a queen. She's a proper queen, and that he's connected to her.
And she does his bidding.
And she's not doing it. She wants him. Yeah,
I know, but that's what he wants to show. In other words, she is the legitimate granddaughter of Nebuchadnezzar. She is my queen. and I'm the king.
Yeah.
And she's hoping that she's going to come and support him and say, yeah, this guy's amazing. This is the best thing that ever happened for the Persian government, whatever. Not only does she not do that, but she refuses to come. Okay, this is a major slap in the face and a major political disaster of Achashverosh, right? In the 3rd year of his reign. He is stuck now. Now, why is Vashti doing this? Because Vashti is no pushover. From Vashti's point of view, it's my title of royalty. It's not your title. You owe me. Not I owe you. So you ain't going to boss me around. I do my parties, you do your parties. But I'm not going to attend your party and be your puppet and marionette. That's basically what she's saying. And now he's stuck because he doesn't know how to solve the problem. This is really embarrassing. And because everybody heard that he's invited the queen, and he's now got to make up an excuse why the queen is not coming. Let's go back. So Vashti refused to come. The king's commandment by the chamberlains, and the king was full of anger, which burned in him. Now the king said to the wise men who knew the times, Yodei Itim, because I'll say the Chachamim Yodei Itim or the Chachamim of the Sanhedrin, not the Sanhedrin, but well, maybe they do use that term. For so was the king's manner towards all those who knew law and judgment. Why is the king now turning to his advisors? Because he has a major problem here. And he needs to solve it right away. He takes his top 7 advisors and he says, get me out of this, as we say in Hebrew, this blunter. I need to get out of this problem. I need a problem solver right now. And the next to them was Karshana, Shaitar, Admata, Tarshish, Meres, Marsanami, Mukhan, the 7 princes of Persia and Media. So he turned to his advisors and also the 7 kings who were close to him, who were his political advisors. So he has his wise men and his political advisors. Says, what are we going to do? Okay, they have a private meeting in some room somewhere. He says, I am stuck. Vashti is trying to pull muscles and she could take me down. This is really, this is a serious situation. What do we do with Queen Vashti according to the law? As much as she has not done the bidding of the king of Achashverosh, he says, what law can we pass to override Vashti? Because I'm stuck. There's nothing I can do now. I need her. Can't get rid of her. So what can we do legally to overcome this problem? Now, Memuchan, who is one of the princes, right? He's going to come up with an idea. The Chazal say Memuchan is Haman. So, Memuchan says, Vashti has not done wrong only to the king, but also to the princes and to all the people in every province of the king Achashverosh. Says, this is not a personal problem, king. This is a real threat to the kingdom. Achashverosh is getting, yeah, you're right. It's a threat to the kingdom. So what do we do, right? We have this in Israeli politics sometimes. You're trying to pass a law for one person, and you say, it's not about this one person, it's about the general problem, right? So here, Memuchan is saying, don't think it's just an offense to you, the king. This is an offense to everybody in the 127 states. And Achashverosh is leaning forward to hear what he's going to say. For this deed of the queen will come abroad, and all women will take their husbands to be contemptible in their eyes. Why? Because they'll hear that King Achashverosh commanded Vashti, the queen, to be brought before him, and she didn't come. So every woman is going to rebel against her husband at home. She won't do the dishes. She won't do the cooking. She won't clean the house. It's going to upset our whole culture and society. Because if Vashti could do it to the king, hey, Im barazim nafla shall have it, we say in Hebrew. Maya gidu ezavei, right? If the tall trees are falling down, what are the little hyssops going to say? We're stuck in the walls. So we've got to do something quick. We have to pass a law to stop this. This is terrible, terrible. And the king is listening even closer. So this day, not finished yet. This day, all the princes of Persia and Mede who have heard of the deed of the queen say that the like until all the king's princes, there will be a rise and contempt and wrath. Even the princes, there'll be contempt and wrath for their wives. So if it please the king, let there be a royal command. It will be written among the laws of Persia and Medes, not to be altered. Vashti will not come before King Ahasuerus, and the king will give her royal estate into another that is better than her. By the way, I told you that Vashti means the best one. And so there's a play on words here, the one who's better than her. Okay. Let me read it again in Hebrew. What does Mehuman say? Let there be a royal command. Let it be written in the laws of Persia and Mede. Ashalotavi, the Vashti is not allowed to come to the king. And because her kingdom is going to be given to somebody else. So, number one, it's not that Vashti didn't want to come to the king. It's that she was not allowed to come to the king because we just passed a law within 5 minutes that she's not allowed to come to the king. That's number one. Solution number one. It wasn't Vashti who didn't want to come to the king. There's a law. The queen's not allowed to come to the king. And then what do? And then the king's decree will be published throughout all the kingdom, which is a great one. And women will be told to give honor to their husbands from young until old. Let me explain what this law says. Let's read it and you'll see exactly what the law is in 22. And then he sent letters to all the king's provinces, and every province according to the writing of every people, and to every people in their language. And it's said in the letters to every province, and this is the way they read the new law, that every man should bear in his own house and speak his own language. If you notice, what Mehuman told them to do and what they wrote is not the same thing. Okay, so let me explain what's going on here. Number one, part one of this law is that Vashti was not allowed to come to the king. So obviously the servants made a mistake. I never did it. I never said it. It was a mistake. It was part two. The king has to have another woman because this one's wrong, because she doesn't respect her husband. And in general, women have to respect their husband. I'm not saying to you guys, I'm just saying that what the law passed. Number three, part three of the law. Everybody is allowed to speak their own language and the language of their people, meaning he's throwing in a carrot into this law. Whenever you want to make a law that nobody knows what it is, you throw a carrot and people see the carrot, they say, "Oh, that's a good law." And it's a language law. Everybody in the 127 provinces, they can speak their own language and live according to their own culture. Hey, great, we're for it. What else does it say? Who cares what else it says, right? And every man should rule his own house. What does that mean? Nobody understands what it means except for Ahasuerus and Memucan. I'll tell you what it means. Every man shall rule his own house, which means the man controls the house. So, now took your teeth, the man always controlled the house. No, legally, the man controls the house. Are you following yet? Now, let me explain the problem. How come Ahasuerus could not divorce Vashti if he didn't like her? Because he would lose the title. But now, according to the new law that they just passed, it says the man controls the house, which means if the woman before marriage owns some property, it now belongs to the husband. If the woman, which according to halakhic law, it's not that way. If semilug does not go to the husband. According to the new Persian law, it does. If the woman, for instance, had lots of money, it now belongs to the husband. If the woman, for instance, had a royal title, it now belongs to the husband. Get it? So now he can divorce Vashti and he still has her title. Solved. He doesn't need her anymore. In other words, this crazy law, which threw in the carrot that people could speak their own language, I'm sure everybody liked that idea and that they can keep their culture, this multiculturalism we had in Canada in the 1970s. Everybody was saying, yes, yes, great, inclusiveness, whatever. But they didn't read the small print of what the other things in the law said, because they couldn't figure out what the heck it was talking about. The man controls his house. Like, I know what man goes to the house, but if they would read the other part of the law, which was not part of the letter, I'm sure it says in the small print that if all the things that belong to the woman now belong to the man, but nobody's reading it because they only need it for the king anyhow, and nobody has to see it, and no lawyer has to know that it exists. They only have to know in the Supreme Court, in Shushan Abira, they have to see the copy of the law. That's all. So Achashverosh has solved the problem. Vashti was never invited. He can get rid of her, and which he does, and I'm sure it wasn't just a divorce. It was probably getting rid of her completely. And he now owns her title. Yeah. Point is, he's not so dumb. So here was chapter 1. Okay, questions?
Well, it's just interesting because like my Persian friends are very submissive to their husbands. It's the culture is very much man dominated.
You're saying it worked until today, even.
Yeah. Seems that way.
Yeah. Okay, I want to look for chapter 2.
So another interesting thing is that Haman Dafka asks Zeresh, his wife, for a lot of counsel. Like he listens to what she has to say.
That's true.
So I told you, in the Persian culture, there is this idea of the wise woman, and also the idea of the power of the woman. Chapter 2. Try to do chapter 2, even though we don't have that much time. After these things, the wrath of the king Achashverosh shachacha. Here it says assuaged, which means it disappeared. He remembered Vashti and what she had done, and what was decreed against her. Vashti's gone, and there are no more problems. The problem solver came in and solved the problems. But now, said the king's servants that ministered, you have to seek for the king young virgins, fair to look upon, and let the king appoint officers. In other words, you need a queen. So how are you going to do it? So you have to appoint officers in all the provinces of the kingdom. They should gather together all the young virgins in Shushan the castle, to the house of the woman, and to the custody of Haggai, keeper of the women, and let their ointments be given. Let the maiden that pleases the king be queen instead of Vashti. The thing pleased the king, and he did so. Why did this idea please the king? Now, if you understand that he's just a foolish king, no, he likes going to beauty pageants, so why not? No. I'll tell you what the thing is. The question is like this. When you're marrying royalty, there are only a few people like that. So you marry Vashti, it's not out of love. You marry Vashti for the title. But now he's going to marry a queen, but the king can have whoever he wants. So how do you marry a queen that is going to be effective without necessarily having a title? Because he's thinking that title, it goes to their head. I don't need another queen. I already got the title of the first one. They're too arrogant. They're going to try to control me. I need somebody simple. But how do I get everybody to like her? Because the problem is, if I have 127 provinces, let's say the queen is from India. So everybody from India will like her, but the people from the other provinces won't. They'll say, oh, she's from India, so of course she doesn't like the Pakistanis, and that's why he's not nice to us. Or let's say she's from France, and then everybody in England says, oh, she's from France, but everybody in France will like her, from England won't. And then if she's from, I don't know, Germany and Italy. And so the problem is, no matter what country she's from, the other countries will blame her for something. But anyhow, so he figures, let all the countries participate. That already is a good idea. If all the provinces participate and they send one representative, they all feel like they have equal possibilities of getting the queen. Fantastic idea. And then the question is, who do you pick? Okay, but in the meantime, he likes the idea. The pageant gives equal opportunity for every province to have the possibility of the queen being from their province. And I'm sure they all want that. Now there's a pause on the story. There was a certain Jew in Shushan, and his name was Mordechai, the son of Yair, the son of Shimi, the son of Kish, and he was a Benjaminite. Now in Hebrew, it's interesting because Yehudi means from the tribe of Yehuda, and Yemini means from the tribe of Benjamin. So the Midrash already says, make up your mind. Was he from the tribe of Benjamin or was he from the tribe of Judah? You know, today when we say Jews, there are two reasons why we're called Jews. Number one, we're from the tribe of Yehuda, almost all of us, except for the Kohanim and the Levim. But there are a few spats of also numbers of Aseret HaShvatim who came back, according to Divrei Yamim. But the vast majority of us are from the tribe of Judah, some from Benjamin, because it was a small tribe. And and we also came from Judea. And that's why we're called Jews. We're from Judea. So the simple meaning of why Mordechai is called a Jew is because he's from Judea, the southern kingdom, which survived after 722, after the northern kingdom was destroyed. And it's the southern kingdom of Judah, which is destroyed by the king Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylonia, and throws them into Babel for 70 years. Because the northern kingdom didn't come back at that point, and basically still didn't. So, so he's, the simple meaning is Ish Yehudi, he's from Judea, but he was a Benjaminite. The Talmud says an interesting thing, says he's a Benjaminite, so why is he called a Yehudi? Because anybody who admits that there's one God, from the word hodot, to admit that there's one God, he's a Jew. That's the meaning of a Jew, to admit that there's one God. So now Mordechai was in Shushan Habirah, right? Where I said that the aristocracy lives. So he had a position. According to the simple meaning here, he had a ministerial position even before he was like the high-ranking second to the king. He was in the palace daily. So he obviously had some position there in the palace. The Talmud says that he was one of the Chachamim Yodei Haitim, one of the wise men who knew what the things that are going on in the changing of times. So this is Mordechai. And he was carried away from Jerusalem. The captives were carried away under Yechoniah, the king of Yehuda, who was the king right before Tzidkiyahu. Shehegla Nebuchadnezzar Melech Bavel, and he was carried away under Nebuchadnezzar Melech Bavel, who eventually destroyed Judah. The Vilna Gaon here, by the way, says, why does it say 3 times? Hogla, imagola, asher hogleta. Why does it say he was exiled 3 times? Vilna Gaon, who was also a big Zionist, he says that Mordechai didn't want to leave Israel. He was exiled the first time, and he came back to Yerushalayim. Then they exiled him the second time, he came back again. The third time he exiled, okay, he figured out can't stop that anymore. So they had to exile him 3 times until he stayed in Persia. That's the Vilna Gaon. Vahiomenet Hadassah, he brought up Hadassah, Esther, his uncle's daughter, which would make her his first cousin, unless, right, Batodo, Esther Batodo, that's what it sounds like. Even though it sounds, and sometimes it looks like he's the first cousin, sometimes he looks like he's the uncle. But according to the simple meaning, it sounds like he's the first cousin. Ke'en la'avim, because she was a yetoma. She was without parents. Benara yefat Torah, and she was she was fair to look upon. Her father and mother were dead. Mordechai took her for his own daughter. So I can assume here that Mordechai is the cousin. Now it came to pass when the king's commandment and his decree was published, that many maidens were gathered together to Shushan, to the custody of Haggai, and Esther was taken to the king's house. In Hebrew, vatilakach. Vatila kach in Hebrew means to be taken by force. All these other women were probably doing whatever they could to be noticed by Haggai, who came around because they all wanted to be part of the pageant. Esther was the exact opposite. She was like Gal Gadot, who didn't want to win the beauty pageant in Israel. That's an interview she said one time. So the same thing was Esther. Esther was taken by force, and she didn't want anything. The king's command is his decrees were published, and when many maidens came to gather together in Shushan the castle, under the custody of Haggai, Esther was taken to the king's house by force, to the custody of Haggai, keeper of the women. And the maiden pleased him. She obtained kindness of him, meaning Haggai liked her. And he speedily gave her ointments with portions of the 7 maidens were given out to the king's house, and he advanced her and her maidens to the best place in the house of the women. Esther had not made known her people nor her kindred, for Mordechai told her not to say that she's Jewish. And Mordechai walked every day before the court to find out how Esther was. And now when the turn of every maiden came to go before Achashverosh, they did for 12 months all these beauty procedures, anointing 6 months with myrrh and 6 months with sweet odors and other ointments of women. And that this is the way the maiden came to the king. And whatever she would desired was given to her. And in the evening she went, on the morrow she returned to the second house of the women, to the custody of Shashgaz, the king's chamberlain, who kept all the concubines. She's now called the concubine because she slept with the king. She came in and she went to the king no more, except if the king called her by name. That was the turn of Esther. And if you see the Hebrew, the anthellations here, the ta'amim, ubehagia, tor Esther, there are all these pauses, which means she didn't really want it. Ubehagia, tor Esther, bat Avichai eldod Mordechai. Even in the cantillations, you can hear the hesitation. So the way it's made. So in Esther, the daughter of Mordechai, who took her as a daughter, told to go to the king, she asked for nothing. Whatever Haggai's chamberlain favor, that was it. The keeper appointed, and Esther obtained favor in the sight of all that looked upon her. So Esther was taken into Achashverosh, into the royal house, in the 10th month, which was the month of Tevet, in the 7th year of his reign. That's 4 years after Vashti. And the king loved Esther above all the women, and she obtained grace and favor in his sight more than the others. So he set the royal crown upon her head and made her queen instead of Vashti. He made a great feast for the princes and the servants, even the feast of Esther. He made a release to the provinces, which means hanacha. He made a reduction in taxes, gave gifts according to the bounty of the king. So, and again, I'm not going to talk about this next verse because it's a little complicated. Doesn't mean the virgins were gathered again for the second time. But Esther did not make known her kindred nor her people, as Mordechai had charged. For Esther did the commandment of Mordechai, just like she was told. So, twice it says that Esther, not only did she not ask for anything, she also didn't say where she was from. Why? I'll tell you what I think. King Achashverosh is sitting there in front of these women coming around at the pageant. And first comes, as I said, Miss India. Miss India comes, and all the ones from India are clapping. Lots of people in India. Yeah, go. And he says, wow, lots of people clapping. But then everybody from Pakistan and everybody from China and whatever, they're all going boo, boo, because they don't want her. Okay, fine. She looks nice, but hey, next. Miss Pakistan comes. Okay, everybody in Pakistan is clapping. Everybody from India is booing. The same thing. Miss France comes. Everybody in England is booing. Everybody from France is, and the Quebec are not sure what to do. So the point is that there's nobody could, he's looking to see how the people react. And obviously, some are for, some are against. That's just the way it is, right? It's like, in a football game. And then this one woman comes, Esther. Nobody knows what people she's from. because nobody knows what people she's from. Nobody can boo her. Because if she was Pakistani, the Indians would boo her. If she was English, the French. But nobody knows who she is. She's like the unknown. So nobody knows what to do. So, okay, maybe a few people sing her phrases, most of them not, but mostly it's silent. They just don't know how to swallow this one. And she comes and she's smiling maybe and waving at people. She thinks it's funny. She probably sees the king, waves to him. He thinks it's cute. And what does Ahasuerus realize? She has no enemies. Okay, that's the one. I am conjecturing, I'm raising a hypothesis, but it could be. In other words, this idea of not telling you that you're Jewish is not only because they're anti-Semites, because this is the way you could win the pageant. Because the pageant is very political. As you know, every beauty pageant is politics in the end. They have to get a woman who's a Sunday teacher and is also goes out there and works with homeless in the streets, whatever. So and here you have a political pageant, and the king wants to make sure there are no enemies. And he takes this unknown. She does have some connections, Mordechai, but even that, it's not clear that actually they probably do know because she was living in Mordechai's house. So she has some connections. But she goes there and she seems to be an unknown, and I think that actually helped her. Chazal say in the Megillah, in the Talmud in Megillah, that Esther was Yerakroket. She was a little green, which means she was not good looking, which is funny because that's not what the Megillah says. Maybe Yerakroket means she was very unexperienced and a little bit clumsy. But chut shel chesed mashuch alea. She had some type of grace, some type of chaim that everybody admired. That's what the Talmud says. So, so here we are. I'm going to pause at this point, I think. And we are now at the point that Esther somehow found her way into the palace. And Mordechai feels that this has to happen because he feels this is Mina Shamayim. We're going to need her there. It's true that he's a politician himself. He works in the aristocracy, but he gets this feeling that it's going to help the Jewish people if Esther is close to the king. But he doesn't want her to say anything about being Jewish because we'll wait for the time. It has to be the right time.
I have two things. Number one, there's an opinion that they were married, that Esther and Mordecai were married. How
Yes.
true?
When you say how truthful, the Midrashim, you never know when the Midrash is supplying you information or giving you an idea. That's the problem.
I see.
So, in other words, first of all, if they were first cousins, they could have gotten married. Even if he was older than her, they could have
But
gotten
then
married.
but then he farms her out to the pageant, to
Did he
Ahasuerus.
farm her out, or did they? It says she was taken by force. Maybe he felt there was no other possibility. There's certain things it's hard to say no to. But as I said, Chazal feel this need to say that she was married to Mordechai. It's not the pshat. The pshat is that he just brought her up. But it's true. There's that point of view.
And also,
they're trying to say that she was a good girl until she was taken away by force. It's something like that, in my opinion.
and number two, I think that the appeal of Esther was that she was the exact opposite of Vashti, where Vashti was, royal and she had money and she had connections and she had everything, where Esther had nothing. She had they didn't know where she's from. She had no makeup. She had no, glory about her. She was just simple, and the total opposite of Vashti. And I think that was maybe the appeal.
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree.
That's
very possible. If that's for a king, that's good. Somebody who's not trying to take over the palace. So somebody
Right.
who's,
She
be
had no
there.
name, no lineage, no nothing, no parents,
no
makeup, no oils, no nothing.
What was her name again? JFK's wife.
Jackie Kennedy.
Jackie Kennedy. Yeah, Jackie Kennedy Onassis. Just somebody who's going to smile and and be there for the
No, she had
photos. And,
pedigree. She had
She had
pedigree.
aristocrat. She was an aristocrat.
okay, she was. Okay, maybe
Aristocrat.
that's a bad example. But anyhow, yeah. Right.
Yeah.
The truth is that Esther was no pushover either, but she had no ambitions.
So
She had no
actually,
political ambitions. Yeah. We'll see as the
Um,
Megillah unfolds that Esther was really no pushover. She knew exactly what to do when the time came.
right. So
But-
Esther was like Cinderella.
Right.
Nobody
She's
knew
like
where
Cinderella.
she was
She's like
from. We're going to get into Walt Disney and the Aristocats. We're going to
She's like Cinderella more. You're right.
Something like that. Yeah,
Cinderella. Where's she from? Who is she? Who's that
That's
girl?
right.
that's right.
Was Mordecai a prophet?
No, first of all, prophecy is finished long before that. Haggai, Zechariah, and Malachi. The Talmud says that Mordecai was a member of the Sanhedrin, which means he was the member of the Jewish court, because the term Sanhedrin is a later term. And in fact, at the end of the Megillah, it says V'ratzui l'rov echav, and Mordecai was liked by most of his brethren. Not even everybody, because nobody loves everybody. And it says Parshu mimenu miksat Sanhedrin. The son of the member, the Talmud says some of the members of the Sanhedrin had second thoughts about Mordecai and didn't want to associate with him. What's going on? Your cousin or maybe your wife is married to a non-Jewish king. Okay, so you save the Jews from decimation, but hey, halachically, it was a little bit shady. What's going on there? So Parshu made him accept Sanhedrin. So, which is interesting. So, yeah. Anyhow. Okay, so we'll continue this then next week, and we will finish
Thank you.
chapter 2 and go into chapter 3. Chapter 2 is the plot against the king, Bigtan Vateresh, and chapter 3 is the rise of Haman.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Interesting.
Rafi.
Thank you,
Okay.
Yeah, very
Rafi.
interesting. Great
Shalom,
class.
shalom.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Bye.